delighted to introduce our next speaker to you. This is Kathy Harriet. She is the State Program Director of the Alzheimer's Association, the South Dakota chapter. Kathy holds a Master's of Science degree in gerontology from California State University in Fullerton and a Bachelor's in Human Development from California State in Long Beach. As a master's student, she authored an interdisciplinary course titled Aging and Dementia. Kathy is a nationally credentialed professional gerontologist. Prior to her joining the South Dakota Alzheimer's Association, she was the manager of client care and operations for Comfort Keepers Home Care in Sioux Falls. While living in California, she was the education director for Orange County Alzheimer's Association. A native of Aberdeen, she returned to her home state in 2006 and currently resides in Sioux Falls with her husband, Jeff. So join me in giving her a warm welcome.
Thank you all so much. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm really pleased to see the number of you who came upstairs to hear what I have to say. I will tell you, however, that this will be Alzheimer's disease and some of the signs in a nutshell, because we could talk for probably 2 or 3 hours to cover the topic, but we'll do our best in the time we have allotted, and we will certainly have time for questions at the end. So we want to get started so we have all the time we can have. So with aging, more often than not, we always wonder, do I have it? Is it coming? I forgot where I put my car keys yesterday, so does that mean I'm getting Alzheimer's? I walked into my bedroom to get my book last night, and I couldn't remember what I'd gone in the bedroom to get. But when I went back to my chair, I sat down, and then I remembered it. That's a normal thing to do. And misplacing your keys, a normal thing to do. The problem is if you cannot remember where your bedroom is, what your keys are for, where you put them, and that you even put them somewhere, those can be signs that might be a little bit disconcerting to all of us. Here we have some of the warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. Certainly, by and large, we cannot be our own diagnostician and figure out, oh, yeah, I must have it because all these things are happening. It's very important to get a diagnosis from a physician, not from the internet and not from anything else that you hear from somebody on the street. So one of the things that is primary in Alzheimer's disease that we see most frequently early on is a loss or problems with short-term memory. I don't remember what I did yesterday. I don't remember if I ate breakfast this morning. I don't remember who was coming to our house this afternoon, even though it's written on the calendar. So short-term memory becomes a challenge, and it interferes with our ability to function in a day-to-day situation. We might also have challenges planning things. Those of us who are very good at planning and organizing find it difficult sometimes to put those programs together. Gosh, I know we've got 8 people coming over for dinner on Friday, and I don't even know where to start. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. Could be a sign. Difficulty with familiar tasks. People who maybe are still working and are finding that they're having a hard time at their job. Things just don't come as easily as they did before. Now keep in mind, as we age, there is some problem with memory, mostly in how quickly we can recall something. So it's not so much forgetting or so much not being able to do familiar tasks, but it's more about, gosh, I keep forgetting names. I've never been good at names, so if I forget names, I don't worry at all. And I lay my keys down and I forgot where I laid them, but I usually find them. That's why I put my keys on the same hook every day when I walk in the house. So those kinds of things that can help us remember when we get a little bit foggy as we get older. But this is more significant in that it impacts how we function day to day. We might have problems with words to the point where we're talking and a word drops out of the sentence and we can't bring it back. To the point where I was going to tell you something and it's gone. And we're not able to bring it back to mind. Those are the challenges that are a little bit more disconcerting than now and again forgetting a word in conversation or forgetting what we were going to say. Because if you are aware, a lot of times you remember in a few minutes what it was you were going to say. It just comes to mind. With dementias and Alzheimer's starting, things don't come to mind once they leave the mind. So we might be confused about time and place, problems with vision, not attributed to things like cataracts or any of those other sometimes age-related vision problems, but being affected in your vision because there might be something going on in your brain. Being unable to discern colors, maybe they just aren't as sharp or as clear. Having trouble with depth perception if you've never had trouble with it before. And that's another thing to keep in mind. If you've never had trouble with something and you start having trouble, then we don't worry so much because we've always had trouble remembering names or finding our keys or those common things. If you've always done it, you're still going to do it when you get older. Maybe a little more slowly in the finding part, but it'll still happen. Misplacing things. Now, we're not talking about laying car keys on the wrong table that you never use or forgetting to take them out of your purse and hanging them on the hook. We're talking about coming home from the grocery store and putting groceries into the cupboard that shouldn't be in the cupboard, or preparing a meal and putting it in the bedroom. Putting things in very odd places to most people, but to a person developing dementia or Alzheimer's disease, seems normal to them. So if you're part of a family where someone already has the disease, been diagnosed with the disease, you might find them hiding things in safe places. And sometimes those safe places aren't going to be found for a number of years. I talked to somebody yesterday, actually, who said that her mother was getting Meals on Wheels. And instead of eating the meals, she was putting them in the cupboard, covered up, and this was years back when they came in the little styrofoam things, and saving them so when she had company, she would have something to serve them. And she actually did bring some of those ancient meals out when someone came to her home to have a meal. So that's not a normal thing. And those kinds of activities should concern us if it's a family member or a friend. Poor judgment. I'm sure Attorney General Marty Jackley talked about fraud and financial exploitation. Someone in the early stages or developing Alzheimer's or dementia is very susceptible to this type of thing. You know, I'm your friend, you really need to send me X amount of dollars, or I need you to transfer your bank account to bank XYZ because it's a much safer place. Someone with dementia, Alzheimer's disease, sure, no problem. This person told me, and they're a really good friend of mine. Although I can't tell you their name, it slipped my mind. So lots of scary things can happen if we're starting into that pathway of Alzheimer's or dementia. Oftentimes, too, people start to withdraw. Those who've been really socially active don't seem to want to do what they used to do for a few reasons. One, they may not remember how to do what it was they were so good at in the past. They might be afraid that they'll say the wrong thing, that their sentences won't make sense. And so they hesitate to be in social situations because they don't want to feel like they're stupid. And you also might find changes in personality and mood. Someone who's really been totally mellow all the time flies off the handle at the drop of a pin, or is just extremely emotional. Out of the ordinary responses to personality and moods. Those are things we can see when someone is developing Alzheimer's disease. These are the signs. So what is dementia? We hear that word a lot, and frequently it's used incorrectly, but we're not going to worry about that. We don't have the dementia police out saying, you can't say it that way because that's not what it is. Dementia is an umbrella term. A good thing for a day like today, our umbrella term. So dementia's at the top, much like cancer would be. And under that umbrella, on those spokes around the bottom of your umbrella, there are a multitude of different kinds of diseases that cause dementia. Dementia is primarily memory loss that affects your ability to function day to day. So we have a lot of cognitive and functional decline in people who have dementia, but we want to know sometimes what kind of disease is causing that dementia. You'll see changes in memory, language, thought patterns, behaviors, lots of different kinds of things like that. So let's talk about some of the common types of diseases that cause dementia. I'm going to give you little tiny snippets of those diseases because each of those might take a session in and of itself because of all of the variations and complications that come along. But just so you have a general understanding of what some of those diseases are. Alzheimer's disease, and we'll go into that a little bit more, but that's the most common form of dementia. In South Dakota, there are roughly 17,000 people who have the disease over the age of 65. But we also have another whole group of people anywhere from their late 30s to their middle 60s who have the younger onset form of the disease. So lots of people are impacted by this disease. Vascular dementia occurs when people suffer strokes. Not everyone who has a stroke develops vascular dementia. It really depends on where the strokes touch the brain. So in my mother's case, she had a series of strokes. They call them TIAs. She had lots of those. And every time she had them, she'd lose a little bit more. And that's how that disease works. Frequently, people who have vascular dementia also develop Alzheimer's disease along with it. So it's kind of a double whammy, but that's not the only disease that pairs itself with Alzheimer's. Any one of these and the multitude of other diseases can pair with Alzheimer's. We call it a mixed dementia. Lewy body dementia is one we don't hear a lot about, but it is relatively common. Some of the primary symptoms and signs you might see in somebody who has Lewy body, very similar to Alzheimer's, and sometimes that makes it difficult to diagnose. Lewy body dementia, lots of problems with sleep, acting out dreams during their sleep, almost like a sleepwalker. They really get into acting out those dreams. The other characteristic that we frequently see with Lewy body dementia is lots and lots of hallucinations. They can be scary hallucinations or not so scary hallucinations, but visual hallucinations are common with Lewy body dementia. Sometimes, too, you'll have characteristics that mimic Parkinson's disease. The issues with muscle control, the tremors that we see with Parkinson's, we frequently see in Lewy body dementia also. Frontotemporal dementia affects the frontal lobe of the brain, and there's a multitude of variations of this disease. I mean, it gets more complicated the more we learn sometimes. There is a behavioral variant of this disease that is very much a challenge. The disease tends to move more quickly than some of the other diseases, and the behavioral variant affects the person's frontal lobe in that they have no boundaries anymore. So it would not be unusual for a person who has the behavioral variant of this disease to walk up to any one of you sitting in the audience and just smack you upside the head for no reason. Or cursing and swearing as they're walking down the street, not really caring what anybody thinks. Disrobing in public, urinating in public. Behaviors that are just way off base, but the person has no control over them because of the disease in the brain. The other variant of frontal lobe dementia that is fairly common is what we call primary progressive aphasia. The person literally loses the ability to speak in sentences, to speak words. So there's a lot of just mumbling, a lot of sounds that don't make any sense. Now and again, you might hear a sentence once a year, twice a year, something like that. But for the most part, nothing comes out of that person. Along with those very common types, we have other dementias caused by excessive alcohol abuse. We have dementias that are caused by Just lost my train of thought. Losing our train of thought. No, the alcohol one, the other one that we're hearing a lot about, and it doesn't have an official dementia name yet, is the CTE that we're seeing in athletes in particular, individuals who've had blows to the head, several concussions, have lost consciousness. We're seeing a lot of decline in their brains because of those head injuries. That's being researched quite a bit, and we don't have a lot of information about it, but something to consider for those of you who have had multiple concussions. This could be a risk. So Alzheimer's disease itself, the most common of the dementias, is progressive and always fatal. We do not have any way to slow or stop the progress of this disease. It is always fatal. The medications that are on the market right now will work in some people for some period of time. And it appears that in those individuals that the medications work with, they stay on a plateau for a while. But eventually, even those individuals that are on medications will decline as those people who are not on medications do because of the progress of this disease.
Oh, that's cute.
Everyone who has this disease has it a little differently. And we don't know how this happens or why this happens, but the disease moves through the brain in different pathways in every individual person. So person A and person B both have Alzheimer's disease, totally different in terms of their behaviors and how they've been affected over the course of their disease. The average lifespan of an individual with Alzheimer's disease is about 8 years. However, we can go from 2 years to 20 years. There was a woman at our walk this morning over at the park whose mother will turn 102 years old in December. Her mother has had Alzheimer's disease for 14 years and is in a nursing home. So this is a long-term disease with some people, and it's an extremely costly disease. So there's a whole lot that needs to be done on that front alone. There is no cure, no way to stop the progression of the disease. Once you have it, you have it. So some of the major risk factors of this disease. How do I know if I'm going to get it or not? The biggest risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease is age. The older a person is, the higher their risk factor. And we started about age 65 with the risk factor, anywhere from usually about 1 in 8 or 9 sometimes, so not a real high risk comparatively. 75, 1 in 5 or 6 develop Alzheimer's. 85, 1 in 2 or 3. So the longer you live, the higher your risk is for developing this disease. And we really don't know right now what causes it. So it's tough. You know, the older you get, the higher your risk, and we don't know what causes it, so we just kind of have to hope for the best. I'll talk about a few factors that we are aware of that may be able to stop the progression or the development of the disease, but nothing definitive right now. Gender. Women, we're at a higher risk. It used to be thought we were at a higher risk because we live longer. But now some of the researchers are looking at some of the hormones that we as women have that those lucky men don't have. So that could be another thing that causes this disease. Race and ethnicity. People of Hispanic origin and African American are at a much higher risk of developing this disease than is the white population. Family history. This is not so much genetics. There might be a little bit in there, and I'll address that in a minute, but family history. My mother had Alzheimer's disease, one of her sisters had Alzheimer's disease, and my grandmother had it. That means my risk factor is a little higher than the person who has no one in their family with the disease. So it ups your risk factor, but we really don't know by how much. Genetics. That's probably the most common question I get from people is it a genetic disease? Maybe. We do know that there is a genetic marker that can be identified in people. It's called the ApoE4 gene. If you have that gene along with a combination of 1, 2, or 3, you might be at higher risk of developing the disease. But again, we don't know if you will or not. So in terms of genetic testing, genetic counseling, we don't really highly recommend it, especially if you've not had anyone in your family with the disease. And a lot of physicians really kind of step back from having somebody see if they have that genetic marker, because it still doesn't help us in terms of predicting if you'll develop the disease. The other form is called familial, and that is genetic. However, it's extremely rare. 1% of the world's population has the familial form of Alzheimer's disease. Down in South America, there's a family that's been studied extensively. They've been able to trace Alzheimer's disease in that family back to the 1800s. Lots of records kept in those old village churches, and so that's how they figured it out. But they're studying that family. Everyone in that family who is of a blood relationship has a 50% chance of developing that disease. And the familial type of the disease tends to strike at a younger age, usually in the 30s or 40s. So that's a tough one to deal with. And again, we still don't have a reason why it happens. We still don't have a way to stop it or prevent it. And that's the challenge of this disease and the challenge that our researchers face on a daily basis. Head injuries. We addressed that already, and we'll take time to talk about some other things. So you know that head injury puts you at risk. And the heart-brain connection. If we know anything at all about our risk factors for Alzheimer's and other related dementias, we're fairly certain of the heart-brain connection. We know physically in our bodies that there's a very strong connection between heart and brain, the blood supply and all of that. So it just seems logical that if we live a heart-healthy lifestyle, we may be putting off either the disease developing as early as it might have or preventing it altogether. We still don't know for sure if it works, but man, eating healthy, getting good exercise, and keeping your brain active through whatever thing you choose to do to keep it active, I'd sure give that a try in hopes that that really is the answer to preventing this disease. So let's talk just a little bit about what happens to individuals who have this disease. And we're going to go quickly because I want to allow some time for questions. The early stage of the disease, sometimes you can't really tell the person has the disease then. They might forget things now again. They might have difficulty with tasks. The items that up here, word finding, losing and misplacing. Some of those things we listed as early signs of possibly having the disease. In the middle stage, the person has a lot more confusion. They can't keep track of what day it is. They can't remember where they live or where they're supposed to go or how to get there. They might have to have help choosing the clothes they wear because they can't make the decision about what they should wear, and they might have some direction needed when they get dressed. They might not know what goes where and how to put it all on. So we see a more decline as the person goes through the middle stages. Problems with names, loss of awareness of things that occurred recently, might forget birthdays. If they were really good at remembering birthdays all through their life, they suddenly don't remember anyone's birthday. Things like that that really are starting to impact them more and more in their daily life functioning. Changes in their sleep patterns. We hear frequently that the person is sleeping all day and won't sleep at night. And if that spouse or sibling or parent is the family caregiver in that case, that person can't sleep either. So it becomes a real challenge as a caregiver when person progresses through the disease. We also see them at a higher risk for getting lost. Now, getting lost can occur at any point in the disease. So don't say, well, my mom's in the early stages, so we don't have to worry about it. Yes, we do. Exit-seeking behavior is very common and very dangerous, especially in the area that we live, the state we live in, with the extremes of temperature, with lots of rural areas where someone can go out and we don't see them again. They don't know how to get back home. My grandma used to walk to church every morning a block from where she lived, and she got lost every day that she went out to do that, a block away. So imagine what happens if someone would get out of town in a car, having someone give them a ride or just walking. That's a real risk for people. In the late stages of the disease, people lose the ability to converse where it makes any sense at all. They may totally lose the ability to speak. They will need assistance with all aspects of personal hygiene. Some people can still walk, but a lot of people are either wheelchair bound or bed bound by the time they get to the late stages of this disease. A very difficult time, and for family caregivers, this stage of the disease is frequently when a family member is placed into a long-term care facility because the caregiver just can't provide the intense care that's needed by someone in the late stages. They may lose the ability to walk. They need help with eating and drinking. They can't take the spoon and bring it to their mouth. They need more sleep, and they will sleep more frequently. Total incontinence is a given at the late stages of this disease, a real challenge for those people who are caregiving at home. And finally, impaired swallowing. The question sometimes is can a person die from Alzheimer's disease? And yes, they can. And what happens if some other disease hasn't jumped in place is the brain no longer breathes, the brain no longer controls swallowing, and that will cause the death of the person from the disease. It's a very tough disease. There's no two ways about it. So in the midst of all of this challenge, and how do we do this, and where do we go to get a diagnosis, and who's going to help us when mom is just really hard to handle? The answer is the Alzheimer's Association. We are part of a national organization of chapters across the United States. We all work on the same plan. So if you live in Minnesota or you live in Wyoming, there's an Alzheimer's Association that does the same things that we do in the South Dakota chapter. Our offices are in Sioux Falls, but we serve the entire state of South Dakota. It does not matter where you live in South Dakota. If you need us, we will help you. We provide education programs much like this today, also provide community education, training for staff members of care facilities across the state. Probably the most important takeaway from this is our 24-hour helpline. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If you need help, if you have a question, if you're in the midst of a real challenge, pick up the phone and call the helpline, because those social workers can help you through anything. We provide information and referrals. We provide care consultation. I should say I provide care consultation. And all of the services we provide are free. It's not going to cost you a nickel for anything we provide. Families who are dealing with the disease who haven't contacted us yet, we will provide you with a free packet of information if you call us. We want to get you on the road to being educated about this disease and feel comfortable and confident in your abilities to be a caregiver if that's the route you've chosen. We offer support groups across the state. We're adding to that list on a regular basis. Here in Rapid City, we have a support group on the 4th Friday of the month at the Rapid City Library on Quincy. It meets at noon. There are support groups in many of the bigger towns right now across South Dakota, so if you don't live here in Rapid City, if you want to call the chapter office number, 339-4543, we can tell you where the closest support group is for you. It's a great resource. We also have the Safe Return Medic Alert Bracelet, which is an ID bracelet that helps protect people who do wander away. Their information and contact information is on that bracelet, so if somebody finds them, at least we have a chance of getting that person home. The website, alz.org, a multitude of resources for you. So if nothing else, spend a few days on the website. You will learn a whole lot. And if you still want more information, call our office. We'd be more than happy to help you. One last thing. I have a table downstairs, so after this is all done and said and done, really encourage you to come downstairs and stop at the table. There are brochures. I do have packets for those of you who might be family caregivers. We are part of a consortium of individuals across the state, from community members to agency members to members of working in state government. The South Dakota Alzheimer's and Dementia Work Group. We are working together to gather information to build a state plan for Alzheimer's disease. That state plan will set standards of care, standards of education, standards of training, and standards for resources across the board for members of the state of South Dakota. This survey will help contribute to the information we're gathering to help us write a very good plan. So if you would take about 10 minutes this afternoon after this is all finished and stop down at the table, be happy to have you fill one out while you're here, and I would appreciate it. We have time for questions.
Absolutely. We're gonna ask you, make sure that you let us come to you with a microphone. We have folks watching this online, so we want to be sure that everyone can hear our questions. So I'm gonna bring a question from Pierre first.
Okay.
So what diagnostic tools are used to diagnose dementia?
Great question. How do we get a diagnosis? We need to find a physician, first of all, that is familiar with Alzheimer's disease. Frequently, we suggest that you have your family practice doctor, your internal medicine doctor, excuse me, refer you to neurology or a neuropsychologist. They can do the end part of this, but what you need first of all from your primary care physician is a full physical. Blood work, urine work, all of that, along with your family history, your medical history, everything there is to know about you to know what's going on. Because sometimes people actually have a medical condition that can mimic the memory loss that comes with Alzheimer's disease. Untreated depression is one of the big ones, can cause confusion and problems. So what the doctor's trying to do is eliminate all those causes, and then once he's fairly certain that that might be what it is, we'll refer you on to another practitioner who can do more of the neurological assessment. It's important that if you are someone, let's say in your early 80s, and you're concerned about some memory issues you've been having, if you go to your physician and your physician says to you, do not worry, you're in your 80s, that's normal. You need to find another physician who will take you seriously for what you're concerned about. It's helpful to keep track of some of the signs you have. So when you go to the doctor, you can actually say, I'm concerned because. But the full workup along with all of that is really what you need to get a definitive diagnosis. Sometimes the neurologist will do an MRI of your brain to see if there are changes in the brain indicative of Alzheimer's or one of the other dementias. And sometimes, if they're very concerned and they just can't pinpoint it, they will do what they call a PET scan, which actually shows the activity in your brain and is about 95% accurate in identifying Alzheimer's disease. So lots to do to get it. Question? Oh, over here.
Starts here, over here. And then we go there.
Okay.
My sister has early onset Alzheimer's, and she was diagnosed about 3 years ago.
Okay.
They told her at that time that she had Alzheimer's. She had been the caregiver for my father who had Alzheimer's. So she knew what was coming and the progression of this disease. Now, every time we call and we talk, she is extremely depressed because she can see the progression of this and she sees where she's going. Do you recommend that people are told that they have Alzheimer's, or just the caregiver is told that they have Alzheimer's?
We recommend that the person be told if they have the disease. We assist frequently families in how do we start coping with this disease? What can we do to provide support? It's an extremely challenging position that your sister is in because she's been your dad's caregiver. She will know, particularly in early onset and the very early ages of the, or stages of the disease, the person is aware that something is not going on. So it's almost necessary to explain what it is. Providing her with extra support, even through a support group. Actually right now there's only one in Sioux Falls, but we can provide some extra support to people who are struggling in the early stages and just don't know what to do. What we do encourage is that you continue to do everything you can do for as long as you can do it, even if it's not quite as good as you used to do it, or you don't have all the skills necessary, keep on doing it. We don't want caregivers to take over running the life of someone with Alzheimer's if that person is still very capable of doing a lot on their own. We might want to talk a little bit afterwards if that's okay with you, and maybe I can give you a few more ideas.
Up front.
Hi, I have basically just two quick questions.
Sure.
Now, you were talking about race. What is the statistics for Native Americans?
We don't have good statistics now. I know there are some, but unfortunately they're not in my brain today. Okay. I picked the two high-risk groups, and I can certainly, if you want to give me your name and information, I can check those statistics and get them to you.
Okay, the second one was, I have brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
I've had 3 in my life, 2 from sports. And I was wondering, is there a volunteer study of some kind, or who would I contact to maybe you can get with them and they can get some more data on for your
for what we do.
For further.
We're in a real tough position here in South Dakota because right now we don't currently have any research going on related to Alzheimer's disease. Makes it tough. The closest place that we can probably find any Alzheimer's related research right now is at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. You might try contacting them to see if they have any research protocols going on that you would fit into. And then also we can get in touch and provide you with some additional resources that might be helpful for that.
So we got a question back here in the back, and then we're going to take a question from Winner.
Does fluid on the brain cause Alzheimer's symptoms, and how is it treated, or some answers to that?
I don't have an answer for treatment, but there is a dementia that is caused by fluid on the brain. Again, that would have to be something I would get to you in terms of information. I can give you my card before you leave and we can connect. I can do some research for you and send that out. There's a lot of not smaller diseases when it's the person you know, but less common dementias, that would be one of them. Also for folks who have Parkinson's disease, there's a pretty high risk of developing dementia along with Parkinson's disease. So just an awareness of that. With yours, in terms of treatment and all, I don't know enough about it just off the top of my head and from what I know to really give you a good answer. So I'd like to get that to you after today.
So our question from Winner is about medications causing or speeding up dementia and Alzheimer's.
I don't know, I really couldn't give a definitive answer about medications that cause Alzheimer's or even speed it up. One thing that we do know about medications and people who have Alzheimer's disease is they respond differently to standard doses that you and I might take. And so it's very important for a physician and a pharmacist to work together to determine what is going to be the best dosage. We can't just say, well, this is what you've been taking for 10 years, so just continue taking it, because it might be causing negative effects that we aren't aware of because of that Alzheimer's disease. So in terms of giving you specific medications, I really don't even know if there's a list of those, but instead I would just encourage you to work closely with the doctor. Don't be satisfied with, well, your mom's got a little bit of depression, so let's put her on this. and give her a standard dose. That's not the approach we want to take when someone has Alzheimer's or another dementia. We want to be the person who says, wait a minute, are you sure this is the right thing? And could you check with the information you have? I'd like to talk to the pharmacist. They're a great resource for information on medications. I'm not knocking the ability of physicians, but they have a whole lot of other stuff they have to know. And so pharmacists have to know medications. So that's where you want to start first in terms of looking at that answer.
We have a question up front, then we have a question from Pierre, and then there.
My question is, my father committed suicide, and right after he died, my mother became afflicted with dementia, and the doctors told me that it was traumatic Alzheimer's. Is that a true diagnosis? Because I've always wondered, if there's going to be a familial situation with me or my brother.
What we find in situations, in the experience I've had in working with family members, and I just talked to someone who had a very similar story just this week, is we actually, those of us who are going to develop Alzheimer's disease, actually have some of the makings of the disease way before the symptoms start exhibiting themselves. And we don't have anything firmly stated in this regard, but if your mother had the symptoms of the disease, but they just hadn't manifest yet, and she suffered that traumatic loss in her life, that was enough to kick that disease in. So I don't know that I would call it, cause-wise, you might be able to say a traumatic cause of it, but more a trigger. It was a trigger to her, that disease manifesting itself. And it happens in people, so absolutely it's a real thing.
So out of Pierre, they would like to know if there's a correlation between sleepwalking and Alzheimer's disease.
Not that I'm aware of. That would not, it's not in my book of knowledge right now.
This kind of goes with the woman over here, a correlation between events and the onset. My father, who has Alzheimer's, retired, and once he gave up everything that had been throughout his life and his passion, the onset came very fast. Is that also a correlation between maybe the familiar lifestyle to going into the unknown?
I wouldn't say that absolutely that would occur in everyone, but it sounds as though with your father, that was something that maybe triggered it. And that's one of the reasons we really encourage people to stay active. People who are working, who haven't yet given it up, really need to start developing things that they will be able to do and that will engage them socially with other people or activities in the community. So when they do give up that life that's been part of who they are for 30, 40, 50 years, there is something to turn to. I know with my own husband, I made him start doing other stuff because we worry about folks who are isolating themselves because of situations like that. Gosh, I don't have any hobbies, I don't really like to do things, and it's hard to start those things up after you've given up that job because you're still going through that, oh man, what am I gonna do with myself? And I don't feel like doing anything. I think sometimes a depression will set in, and people with Alzheimer's, it doesn't cause Alzheimer's, but people with Alzheimer's disease have a high risk of depression. It's very common. And I would say not so much the correlation, but the combination of things might have kicked it into gear when he actually had manifestations early on.
Not putting blame on anyone, but just for...
Wait, let me get you a mic, otherwise people aren't going to be able to hear you.
I'm sorry to extend this out.
That's
I'm not
okay.
putting blame on anyone, but to extend to their partner or their wife or husband the need maybe for someone to continue on with something that has been important in their life, In my father's situation, it turned a different direction. It was time to make change, and so he pretty much sold off everything he had, but the partner was not aware that was happening.
Definitely go
Good
talk
point.
to Kathy. She's got a wealth of knowledge. We got time for one more question. Please, if you want to talk to Kathy, please call 339-4543. As you can see, she's a wealth of knowledge and information, but we got one question here in Rapid.
My question is dealing with an individual's rights. I have a mother and father that both have dementia. My father has given me the right to take care of him. My mother hasn't. My mother is a good faker. She's in the middle stage of Alzheimer's. What can we do as individuals that have no right on these individuals? Because I'm finding that it's costing me thousands of dollars to take conservatorship or anything else, and then the courts are involved. What can I do as the daughter and the lead of this to make sure that I can take care of my mother the way she needs to be, because she has been 5150 already and other things? How can I do this with the laws that we have in place right now to protect her rights?
That's a big challenge here in South Dakota and a lot of states is once a person with Alzheimer's is declared incompetent, and usually that goes through the courts again, sometimes just through the physician saying she's not capable of making decisions on her own, the only avenue you have is through the court system, through guardianship or conservatorship, which speaks, I know, it's not everything.
This sounds like a really great conversation for down at the booth.
Yeah, down
so-
at the booth, and we'll connect you with some legal resources that might be able to help. In terms of legal resources, you want to look for someone who has familiarity with elder law as opposed to general law, because there's some specifics about guardianships and conservatorships.
So I would like to give Kathy a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.